Should I be renting or should I be buying property? This is the million-dollar question and has been a hot topic for many years. And I promise you, a lot of people will say, buy property, it's an asset. Or if you're renting, you're paying off someone's mortgage. You know, it depends, guys. There is no right or wrong answer. It literally depends on where you are and your circumstances. So if you are someone who is like my dad, who says property is always key, property is an asset, I agree, okay? In the long term, I agree. But just because I need a place to sleep tonight doesn't mean I must go buy a house. Because you know what? Sometimes buying a property at the wrong time can scar you for a very long time. So stick around. My name is Noguhle Khumalo, and this video is about the pros and cons of buying versus renting. I will take you through the pros and cons of buying and the pros and cons of renting. And you can make a decision at the end of this video about what works for you. And remember, what works for me might not work for you, might not work for the next person. All right, cool, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and become a regular person on this channel. We are always talking about personal finance and how to be an adult. All right, guys, let's talk about the advantages of renting. There are just two main things for me. It is firstly affordability, and number two, flexibility. On affordability, it is usually cheaper to rent. Okay, this is known. This is not like, you know, new discoveries that I've made. It is known that it's usually slightly cheaper to rent. Obviously, people will compare and say, okay, you're paying rent of 7,000 rand, but the mortgage bond is like 8.5 or 9,000 rand. That's such a waste. You're paying off someone else's mortgage. Yes, when you look at it like that at face value, it does look like, this doesn't make sense. You know, like I would much rather be buying and have an asset at the end. But to be quite honest, guys, sometimes you do not have that additional 1.5. Okay, and it's not to say that you will never buy a house. It just means that right now I don't have that money. And also, when you compare, you actually need to compare like with like. You can't compare your rental versus the mortgage bond, because it's not just the mortgage bond that you pay when you're buying a house. For example, if you are renting, the cost that you have, your rental, the deposit, water, and electricity. Okay? When you are buying a house, it's the mortgage bond, it's the transfer costs, it's the legal fees, the house insurance, levies, what else? Rates, I don't know if it's the same thing. And on and on. There is a lot of things that come with buying a house. It is not as simple as reading that, okay, it is 1.5 million, divide this by 20 years, divide this by this interest rate, where this is what I'm going to pay. It's not that simple. So I would advise that if you do really want to compare, look at some of these calculators that they have online. Check it out. Actually calculate what your actual amount will be if you were to buy the house compared to whether you're renting. Because it might seem like, oh, it's only 1,500 rand difference. But actually in the long run, it could be a lot more than that. And you may not be equipped for that. So that's affordability covered. Number two, flexibility. Flexibility is so key for me because I hate feeling stuck. And with buying a house is a big purchase. It is not something that you just wake up and decide that, yep, today I'm going to buy a house. First of all, for someone like me, even buying a t-shirt takes me 3 days. So now imagine a house. So it is not something that you impulsively get into. Therefore, if you are new to a city, most of us actually don't live where we're from. Most of us move to like cities like Joburg or wherever because that's where you're employed. But you are not sure if that's where you want to live. You're not sure if that's where you want to raise your kid. I'm not even sure if Joburg is where I'll be in the next 3 years. So flexibility is key for me, because if I were to buy a house right now, it would suddenly mean that, if I want to up and leave and go overseas, I need to think about this house. Am I keeping it and renting it out? Am I keeping it and giving it to one of my siblings to look after? Am I selling it completely? Am I fooling myself and saying I'll come back every month just to see that my house is fine? Like, there are so many things that you have to consider. So as a young person, or as someone who is still trying to find themselves in their careers, sometimes buying a house does not make sense because you need that flexibility. Sometimes your company might want you to go work in Cape Town for 2 weeks, and then back in Joburg for 5 weeks, and then down to Durban. So having a house is really like, who's even living in that house, right? Also, in terms of location, like I said, if you're new to a city, you don't really know what the vibe is of these different places. Of course, you can do a quick Twitter search. You can search on Google and they'll tell you lovely area or new area coming up, what. But what happens if you move into a place and 2 months later a new club opens up down the road, or there's a lot of mining that's happening, or there's a lot of construction, so basically you can't sleep, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of pollution? If you are renting, you can up and leave because you don't know anyone. Another thing with flexibility is that you get a chance to live in different areas when you're new to a city. So for example, if you were to move to Joburg, you might have first moved to Midrand. After a couple of years, you realize Midrand isn't really up to your standards. Then you move to Waterfall. From Waterfall, you realize, I don't like it. You move to Joburg South. You are able to do all of these things. And then once you've actually got an experience or a feel of a lot of places, you can actually get a good idea of where you would like to settle, if Joburg is your place of choice. Unlike if you come here and you buy within a week. What if you chose a really bad place with a really bad reputation? There's a high crime rate, and and obviously the person that you're buying from is not going to tell you all of these things because they are also trying to get rid of the property. So renting does have those advantages, and I hope you jot that down. Cool. Now moving on to the disadvantages of renting, because there are. Firstly, sometimes your rental is very similar to your bond. Like I said, sometimes your rent is 7,000 and then when you calculate on that property 24 calculator, the bond is like 8.5 and you're like, wouldn't it make more sense to, actually buy instead of rent? And this speaks to the other disadvantage of renting, is that after all those years of renting, you have nothing to show for it. It is a sunk cost. So you will pay every single month and walk out with nothing. There's no way that you can go back and ask your landlord, hey, I need this money for this. No, it's gone. Every single month you are losing money. It's gone. Another disadvantage, rentals can increase, right? And they're usually increased by inflation, but it's not always the case. For me, I remember my rental increased dramatically and I asked my landlord, I was like, excuse me, what percentage did you use to increase my rent? Like what index did you use to calculate this increase? And he told me, I don't make the prices, you gotta speak to the main person, and I didn't have time for that. But I'm just saying that with rentals, you actually don't have control over what they charge you. They can charge you whatever you want and they want, and if you don't accept, then you can leave. So with rentals, it could be affordable the 1 year, but then the next year it's really not. Another thing with renting is that there are so many rules. There are rules, there are limitations. You cannot just drill a hole into your rental apartment. You cannot change the color on the walls because you like pink and not white. There are so many rules, and when you want to do things, you actually need to ask for permission. And a lot of us, like myself, hate asking for permission because it's like, I'm old, bro. Like, I am old. So for me to be writing a letter to ask for permission, annoys me. Also, there's things like if you're a cultural person and you need to slaughter something, you can't just slaughter a cow in an estate or in someone's house because you don't know how they feel about it. So there are a lot of limitations. So depending on what you do on a normal, regular basis, maybe renting might not be your thing. If you like hosting your friends, maybe renting isn't the thing for you. Cool. Another thing, last thing, is that the owner can decide to sell the place at any time. So if you are renting in an estate where there's a lot of rentals, this is highly unlikely. But if you're renting like someone's house, this person can sell whenever they want, and if they decide to sell, you need to leave because the buyer might not want to rent it out. They might actually want to live in it. So, all right, cool, guys. Those are the advantages and disadvantages of renting. Now let's move on to buying property. The advantages of buying property are simple. After you've made all of these payments, you get an asset in return, and I think that's what a lot of people love about buying property. The fact that all your payments accumulate into equity, accumulate into an asset that you actually can add to your net asset value. You become richer once you're done with your property. Even actually before you're done with your property, I think it's still included. Now, the reason it's so great to have an asset, besides the fact that it increases your net asset value, is also the fact that, one, if you were to decide to sell, you will probably sell at a profit because property generally appreciates over time, unlike other assets like your car. So your car is worth more the first day you drive it than it is like 10 days later. Whereas property, on the other hand, you might buy property for 500,000 rand, and then it appreciates in value, and now it's worth 2 million rand. So the 1.5 million rand is like your profit. It's not your profit, sorry, it's your gain, it's your capital gain, because the property market tends to do that. But obviously, this is just an example. I do not think that your 500,000 rand apartment will be 2 million, but you never know. You never know with property, hey? Another thing is that usually people want to leave these assets for their kids, so it will make a good inheritance once you die. That sounds so bad. It's like I'm planning for people to die, but it's a good thing for your kids to inherit a home. You know, they have a place where they can always go to, and I know emotionally this is a very big deal. So buying a house is a very emotional thing. So it's not, people usually let their common sense leave them, which is why I usually say, if you're going to buy property, take someone who is not really invested in this. Obviously, don't take a stranger, but don't take your partner who's also going to benefit from this. Maybe take your sibling, take a friend, take someone who's actually going to show you all the bad things that you don't see. Because sometimes when you're buying property, you're so happy, finally going to be a girl with the title deed, and you just, common sense goes out the window. You're not seeing the cracks. You're not trying to talk down the price. You're not trying to talk down your interest rates, because you just can't wait to own this property. It is emotional, and I understand, because you're building wealth for your kids, but also remember, this is usually one of your biggest purchases in your whole life. So if you do it incorrectly, it could cost you. Another advantage of buying property is that you can decorate it the way you want. Remember, there's limitations at renting. Also, what my mom usually raises is that people who rent usually move a lot, and that's true. And if you move a lot, your furniture is not preserved. Like, you actually hurt your furniture with each move. And I know some people might say, no, it's only if your furniture is cheap. But in general, if you are moving your furniture a lot, even if it's your washing machine that costs 15,000 rand, the more movement it gets, the more it depreciates in value. Like you're hurting your property. Imagine this is your kid, and every single day you do this to your kid. Of course, your kid is going to get a bit damaged. Yes, they might not be brain damaged and unable to function, but they will not be as well developed as a kid that was handled gently, So with buying a house, rather, you move less because you made your decision, bro. You can't really chop and change every 2 years. So there's less movement. Also, in terms of furniture, when you have bought the house, you can customize your furniture to fit your house. So I remember when I bought curtains for my apartment, I measured the apartment rail and I got curtains made specifically for that. When I move into my house that I will buy, I don't know if my curtain rail will be the same size. So I don't know if I can even keep those curtains, or if I have to get them adjusted and all of that. And that might cost a little bit more money. So definitely, in terms of buying furniture, it's a lot better to buy your expensive furniture when you actually have a house, guys. And lastly, the last advantage, and I actually didn't want to cover it, but I will cover it because it is an advantage and I don't want to look over it. The status that comes with having a house. We all know these titles, hashtag title deeds, girls with houses, the key, you know what I'm talking about on social media. So it is definitely a nice status elevation when you have a house and other people don't have a house. But this is definitely not something that must be high on your priority list, because trying to impress strangers on the internet, it never ends well. Trust me. Lastly, the disadvantages of buying a house. Firstly, you could buy property that is super expensive that you actually can't afford. And you overspend and you try to justify it to say, no, this is going to be an asset for my kids. And you actually can't afford it. And now you're choking in your installments. You can't eat out. You can't buy a car, or you can't change your car. You've only got one car for the past 15 years. And that's fine. That's fine. You can do that. But I'm just saying, just be careful of choking yourself with the house before you can actually afford it. And don't fall into the trap of it's an investment, because it's an investment if you can afford it. If you can't, it is actually a burden. It is going to be a headache. You know that advert of the chicken licking guy, that big orange orangutan that sits on the guy? That's going to be your house. Every time you walk in, you're going to be pissed because number two, It is hard to dispose of property. So if you've bought the wrong property, it is very hard to sell it. It takes time, and you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get people to buy it. You have to renovate it sometimes to make it more enticing. So you spend money to make money, but actually in the end, you don't even make money. Also, there is a lot of admin. It is not something that you must buy in a hurry. Take your time. Do your research. Go to all these viewings. Never buy a house in a rush, because 9 times out of 10 you will regret it. And do not ask me where I got those stats, because I just got them from my head. Right. Also, a very big point, affordability can limit your choices, because people like to rush into buying houses because they think it's an asset. I don't want to pay someone's bond if I'm renting. But the reality is that when they're giving you an amount, when the bank is giving you an amount that you can use to buy your house, they don't give us the same amounts. It depends on your salary, on what you're actually earning. So as a rule of thumb, banks will usually give you 2 times your annual salary. Okay, 2 times your annual salary, right? So if you are someone like me who's a trainee, I'm not yet a CA, but I'm about to be. So if I were to buy my apartment in my first year of my articles, how much do we earn in articles? Okay, I'm gonna make an example. Let's say in a year it's 200,000 rand. That's your cost to the company. The bank is going to give you 200 times 2, so basically they'll give you 400,000 rand to buy your house. All right, now what house are you buying for 400,000 rand? Tell me. And is it a house that you like? Is it in a location that you like? Or do you have to do a lot of work? Are you maybe not buying in an area that, might have some oil mining that's happening, hence the price is so low? So for me, buying a house for 400,000 rand didn't make sense. And also, usually when you buy a house and your salary is very limited, you end up buying a 1-bedroom apartment. And honestly, a 1-bedroom apartment does not make sense to me, because you are buying that property basically just to rent it out at a later stage. And if that's your plan, then okay, that makes sense. But honestly, as someone who would like to buy their first property as their primary property, obviously I'm not saying I will never ever move, but I would ideally like to buy a property and stay in it for at least 5 years. So for me, it wouldn't make sense to get a 1-bedroom apartment, because in the next 5 years I will probably have kids, or a kid, or maybe more. So a 1-bedroom apartment doesn't make sense. And if you're going to say, no, I'll buy it now, and then when I have kids I move into a bigger house, okay, sure, that sounds great in theory, but realistically, if you already have one property, the bank is not going to give you more money to buy a second property, because you're not even done with the first property, unless if they can see that your earning potential has increased. Yes, of course, the second house might be a lot easier if you're buying it with the partner, like you're married and stuff. But if you are not, then it's a bit of a different story. So I wouldn't really rush myself into buying an apartment just to get a 1-bedroom apartment, because no, man, you can rent a 2-bedroom apartment, bro. Relax, bro, relax. And if I could give you my parting comments, is number 1, research. You will never do too much research, especially when it's time to buy a house. Do not jump into big financial decisions without thinking it through. And also don't buy it out of peer pressure, whether it's for your friends or your family, because you're their breadwinner, so they're expecting you to buy a house. Nah, because listen, let me tell you, when you're celebrating these achievements, you post on Twitter, you post on Instagram, people say congrats. It's nice, okay? It's nice. The first month, the third month, yeah, you're asking yourself, what have I gotten myself into? Because you're the only person who's going to pay that amount back. No one is going to help you. And lastly, there is no one right answer about whether you need to be renting or buying. It all depends on where you are. So comment down below and tell me what you guys think. Are you guys buying or are you renting? Do you think there's a correct answer? Obviously, in the long term, buy property. Alright guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment and subscribe, and I love you all. And also, I will be doing a video on things to consider when you are buying your property, so drop down your messages in the comments so I know what you guys want to see.